What if you discovered, late at night when you're alone with your thoughts, that some small part of you actually wants to suffer? It sounds irrational, even disturbing. Yet there's a quiet voice inside you that keeps pulling you into difficult places. You sense it in your attraction to tragic stories, the comfort you find in melancholic music, or the strange curiosity you have about your own pain. It's as though your suffering is a friend you can't quite say goodbye to. And you ask yourself, why? Why would you want to suffer? Are you broken? Or is there something more hidden beneath your pain? You feel this question echo through your mind, like a riddle begging to be solved. The question unsettles you, because to confront it is to confront a truth you've probably buried beneath countless distractions. It's to face the idea that you're not simply a passive victim of misfortune. Some part of you might be complicit in your own misery. And maybe, just maybe, there's a secret longing for suffering that's woven into your humanity. You try to push that thought away, because you've been taught that happiness is the goal. You're supposed to chase comfort, success, validation, anything but pain. Yet the more you chase those pleasant illusions, the more you sense an undercurrent of darkness in your psyche. It's like standing on a quiet lake at twilight. The surface seems calm, but just beneath it lies a mysterious depth. And when you peer into that darkness, you sense a primal force swirling in the waters, beckoning you deeper. It's your own unexplored self, whispering that suffering is not just an obstacle to happiness. It might be something else entirely. You think of Carl Jung's idea of the shadow, the dark counterpart to your conscious persona. In that shadow, repressed impulses mingle with unowned pieces of your soul. It represents everything you don't want to accept about yourself. Your hidden desires, your shame, your aggression, and yes, your capacity to seek out suffering. Jung believed that to become whole, you must integrate your shadow rather than hide it. But embracing your shadow means acknowledging that some part of you is fascinated by pain. It might even crave it. And this feels so contrary to your conscious wish for happiness that you'd rather look away. But if you keep looking away, the shadow only grows stronger. You end up drawn to suffering without knowing why. Ask yourself this: how many times have you gravitated toward a situation that's guaranteed to cause you stress, heartbreak, or disappointment, despite knowing better? Maybe you keep pursuing people who can't love you back. Maybe you sabotage your professional progress right when success is within reach. Maybe you cling to negative thought patterns, ruminating for hours and find a strange comfort in that misery. On the surface, it seems like you're the victim, but in the depths, another force is at play. Something in you actually seeks the storm. Something finds meaning in the tears. And on a level you struggle to articulate, something in you wants to suffer. To understand this paradox, think about Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of amor fati, love of fate. Nietzsche proposed that you should embrace everything that happens to you, including your pain and your failures, as necessary ingredients of your life's journey. He wasn't advocating passive acceptance, nor was he saying you should go out and hurt yourself for no reason. Rather, he was pointing to a deeper affirmation of your existence, suffering included. It suggests that your struggles, your agony, might be essential to your evolution. And so, in a twisted sense, you might find yourself wanting those struggles because they contribute to your becoming. Without them, you'd remain shallow and untested. But with them, you become someone who knows how deep the darkness can go and how to find the light on the other side. Yet this desire for suffering can also have a more pathological side, one that comes from self-punishment or unresolved guilt. Think of Dostoevsky's notes from Underground. The unnamed narrator, the underground man, takes a perverse delight in his suffering. He wallows in his own misery, at once resenting it and clinging to it. He refuses to give it up because it's part of his identity, part of his defiance against a world he sees as oppressive or meaningless. In his suffering, he carves out a kind of freedom, warped though it may be. He can't bear to let it go because without it, he might have to face his own complicity in his circumstances. You might see echoes of this in yourself. Those moments when you nurture your pain as though it's the last shred of authenticity you have left in a plastic world. You hold onto it because letting go feels like betraying something raw and real in you. And then there's Arthur Schopenhauer, who believed that existence itself is marked by suffering, an unavoidable consequence of the blind, ceaseless will driving all life. In Schopenhauer's view, life is essentially dissatisfaction. You suffer because you always want more or something different or something better. And even when you get it, you grow bored and want something else. So, why would you want to suffer if suffering is basically guaranteed anyway? Perhaps it's because you sense that suffering is one of the few states that can break the monotony of life. Boredom is, in a way, more unbearable than pain. Pain at least feels alive. And so, part of you seeks it out not because you rationally prefer agony, but because it tears through apathy like a sword. It forces you to confront the depths of your being. And in that confrontation, you find a certain sense of reality. It hurts, but it's real. Think about it. How often have you felt numb, disconnected, drifting through the routines of life? You wake up, go through the motions, fulfill obligations, but inside you feel vacant. Then something painful happens, a breakup, a financial crisis, a betrayal, and suddenly you're alive again. The pain roars through your mind, but it also awakens you from your emotional slumber. In that moment, you know what it is to feel. You might hate the pain, yet you recognize that it's shaken you out of that deadness. And so a darker part of you wonders, maybe I need the pain. Maybe I want it at least sometimes so I can remember what it is to be fully present, fully human. You might be ashamed to admit this to anyone, even yourself. The world tells you to think positively, to manifest good things, to keep your vibration high. Yet in your quiet moments, you sense the hypocrisy of pretending everything is great. You sense that your soul is deeper than mere positivity. And if your soul is deep, it might demand a deeper experience of life that inevitably includes suffering. You look at the greatest works of art, literature, and philosophy. Almost all of them are born out of suffering. The artist's heartbreak, the philosopher's despair, the writer's agony, they transmute that suffering into something transcendent. And you begin to wonder if you, too, long for the depth that suffering can bring. You don't do it consciously. You don't wake up and say, I want to be miserable. But some subterranean current in your psyche pulls you toward experiences that will break you open, because you suspect that only in that breaking can true insight be found. Jung would tell you to explore this inclination as part of your individuation. To become whole, you must not only see the good sides of yourself but also integrate the dark. It doesn't mean you go out looking for ways to hurt yourself or wallow in victimhood. It means you acknowledge the part of you that wants to touch the flames of existence, even if it burns. That part of you is often overshadowed by your social conditioning, your desire to fit in, to be normal. But ignoring it only makes it stronger. The more you try to force yourself into a sanitized version of existence, the more violently your shadow will assert its presence. And one day, you might find yourself in a crisis you can't explain, pulled into suffering as though by a magnet. Only then do you realize that part of you had been summoning that crisis all along, craving the transformation it would bring. There's also the spiritual dimension to suffering. Various religious and mystical traditions have long spoken of suffering as a path to redemption or enlightenment. Christianity venerates the passion of Christ, seeing in his suffering the ultimate act of love and salvation. Buddhism teaches that existence is suffering, but through understanding and the relinquishment of desire, one can reach nirvana. Hinduism describes karma and samsara, the cycles of rebirth in which suffering is not just punishment but also an opportunity for growth. Even outside formal religion, there's a sense that your suffering can be a purifying fire, burning away the illusions of the ego. You might not subscribe to any particular creed, but you can't escape the feeling that your suffering has a purpose, and that part of you, at a level deeper than conscious thought, wants to undergo that purification. So you walk this path of contradictions, outwardly seeking pleasure and comfort, inwardly courting darkness. You become suspicious of your own motives. Do you cling to your pain because it's an excuse not to strive for something better? Or do you seek it because you sense it's the only way to truly feel alive? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's something else. You realize there are many layers to your psyche, and your relationship with suffering is far more complex than simply wanting or not wanting it. Yet the question remains, why do you secretly want to suffer? There's a psychological viewpoint that suggests you might derive secondary gains from suffering. For instance, when you're in pain, you might receive sympathy or attention from others, which on some level feels good. Or you might get to avoid certain responsibilities because you're unwell. Or your suffering might become your story, your identity, giving you a sense of uniqueness. It's a twisted kind of reward system, but it's real. And acknowledging it can feel deeply uncomfortable. You wonder if your pain is less about cosmic fate and more about your own psychological needs. That realization can be hard to swallow, but it also gives you power. Because if you're partially responsible for creating your suffering, you might also be responsible for transforming it. Then there's the existential perspective. Life is uncertain, chaotic, and often unjust. You can't control most of what happens, but you can control how you interpret your suffering, how you respond to it. For some, seeking suffering is a way to wrest a sense of control from the chaos. If you invite suffering, even unconsciously, you transform it from something that merely happens to you into something you choose. It's a means of asserting your agency in a universe that can feel overwhelming. In that act of choosing, you find a small sense of power, a small flicker of defiance against an indifferent cosmos. It may not be rational in everyday terms, but psychologically, it offers you a feeling of self-determination. You recall the words of Nietzsche once more. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. This has become a cliché, repeated endlessly in self-help circles. But in its original context, Nietzsche was speaking to a profound truth about the transformative power of hardship. By surviving and integrating your suffering, you become someone with greater depth and resilience. So perhaps your secret desire for suffering is a desire for that transformation. It's a gamble you place on yourself, subjecting your psyche to the crucible of pain in hopes of emerging with a sharper understanding of who you are. Of course, it's easy to romanticize suffering, to forget that it can also break you, leaving scars that never fully heal. But even your scars become part of your story. Sometimes, you'd rather bear those scars than have a blank page. Because a blank page might mean you never truly lived. You think of all the romantic poets and tragic heroes who seem to dance with suffering as though it were a lover. They wrote about heartbreak, madness, and existential despair with a strange admiration. Were they simply broken souls? Or did they see that something essential about the human condition reveals itself in suffering? Like a black rose that blooms in the moonlight, dark and beautiful, you sense that you too are drawn to that dark bloom. You feel its petals in your chest when you read a sorrowful poem or watch a haunting film. There's beauty in the shadows, and so part of you is drawn there, willingly. So where does all this leave you? Are you condemned to secretly crave suffering for the rest of your life? Or is there a path that lets you honor your darkness without being consumed by it? You might turn to Jung again, who'd say you need to make the unconscious conscious. That means you stop repressing your attraction to suffering. You examine it, you integrate it, and you channel it into something that serves your growth rather than undermines it. It's a delicate balance. You don't want to glorify suffering, but neither do you want to pretend that you don't feel the pull of it. You want to walk the razor's edge between light and dark, letting each inform the other. This is the alchemy of the psyche, turning lead into gold. Your suffering is the lead, dense and cold. If you embrace it with awareness, it can become gold. It becomes the raw material for your greatest insights, your most profound growth. But that requires courage. You must face the reality that sometimes you seek suffering not because you're a tragic hero, but because you're afraid of your own potential. You must see that sometimes you cling to pain because it's easier to remain a victim than to risk the responsibility of being fully alive. You must also see that suffering can be a twisted refuge, allowing you to feel special or justified in your cynicism. And then you must go even deeper to the place where suffering is the crucible of your self-transcendence, where you realize that without pain, you'd remain naive, your soul undeveloped, where you accept that some pain is part of any worthwhile pursuit, whether it's love, creativity, or self-discovery. So the question shifts from, why do I secretly want to suffer, to what do I hope to gain from this suffering? Because if suffering is the price of certain forms of wisdom, courage, or authenticity, perhaps it's worth the risk. That doesn't mean you intentionally harm yourself or sabotage your life. It means you stop avoiding the inevitable storms. You meet them head on, taking your lumps but staying open to the lessons they offer. There's a difference between courting unnecessary agony and refusing to run from the challenges that shape your destiny. If you can discern that difference, you can transform your relationship with suffering. You can let it be a teacher rather than a tyrant. But you also must be honest about when you're unconsciously creating or prolonging suffering that serves no higher purpose. Sometimes you might cling to toxic relationships or destructive habits because they feed a narrative that you can't let go of. You might replay old traumas in your mind because they validate your belief that life is nothing but pain. You might reject opportunities for healing because you're addicted to the drama of it all. In these moments, your desire for suffering isn't about growth. It's about staying small, staying stuck. And recognizing this requires a brutal sort of self-honesty. You have to look at your shadow and see not just the romantic darkness but the petty, self-defeating impulses as well. Only then can you free yourself from suffering that doesn't serve you. Ask yourself this: what would your life look like if you integrated the lessons of suffering without becoming addicted to the suffering itself? Can you imagine stepping into your own strength, forged by the fires of hardship, yet no longer needing to stoke those fires unnecessarily? That might be the ultimate goal: to face pain when it arrives, to glean whatever insights it has to offer, and then to move forward without regret or longing. To let suffering shape you into a more compassionate, more courageous being, but not to chain your identity to it. That requires discernment, a willingness to separate productive pain, like the pain of growth, from destructive pain, like the pain of self-sabotage. This isn't a tidy process. It won't happen all at once. You might find yourself repeating old patterns, inviting suffering into your life again and again, each time hoping for a different outcome. But if you keep your eyes open, if you remain conscious, those patterns will begin to unravel. You'll start noticing the hidden payoffs you were seeking in your misery: attention, pity, an excuse to avoid risk. Or perhaps it was a craving to feel alive, a longing to explore the depths of your own emotional range. Whatever the case, once you see it clearly, you can decide whether it's still worth it. Sometimes the answer will be yes, sometimes no. The key is that you're no longer unconscious about it. You recall Dostoevsky's underground man, who felt a sick pleasure in his own humiliation, his own self-inflicted torment. It gave him a twisted sense of agency in a world he believed was determined by mathematics and reason. You see a glimmer of truth there. By choosing suffering, he felt like he was violating the rules of rational self-interest. He was asserting his free will. It's tragic, yet also reveals a deeper truth. Your psyche may seek suffering as a way to assert your individuality, your defiance against the tyranny of complacency. But you don't have to remain trapped in the underground forever. You can take that defiance and turn it into creative rebellion, into transformative inquiry. You can say, yes, I feel the pull of suffering. Yes, I acknowledge the darkness within me. But I choose to harness it for my growth rather than let it consume me. Think about how storms shape the landscape. A violent storm might tear down weak structures and flood the fields, but it can also replenish the soil, nourish seeds, and provide fresh water. It's destructive and regenerative at once. Suffering can act like that storm in your life. It can destroy illusions, relationships, even entire eras of your identity. But it can also bring forth new understanding, renewed empathy, a sharper sense of what really matters. In this sense, you might see why a part of you welcomes the storm. It's the part that knows your life can't remain stagnant. It's the part that senses you need to be shaken, uprooted so you can grow anew. The danger is forgetting that storms also require shelter, caution, and eventually a return to calmer skies. Don't become addicted to the storm, but learn what it has to teach you. In practical terms, this means watching yourself closely. When you sense you're drifting toward a painful situation, pause and reflect. What are you seeking? Is it redemption, punishment, validation, depth? Be brutally honest. The more you practice this, the more you'll catch those unconscious patterns before they spiral into unnecessary suffering. You'll still encounter pain, but now you'll do it with awareness. You'll have the power to decide if you're stepping into the fire for a worthy cause or just throwing yourself into the flames for the sake of feeling something. Over time, you might find a richer, more nuanced relationship with suffering, one that acknowledges its transformative potential without glorifying it or becoming its slave. Take a moment now to reflect on your own life. How many of your greatest personal breakthroughs came on the heels of deep pain? How often have you found surprising strength in the face of adversity? If you're honest with yourself, you'll see that suffering can sometimes illuminate hidden pathways in your psyche, guiding you to insights you'd never reach through comfort alone. It's a harsh teacher, but sometimes the only one that can cut through your self-deception. As Dostoevsky wrote, suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. That's an extreme statement, but it points to a truth. Suffering wakes you up. It forces you to ask questions about who you are, what you believe, and why you exist. Without it, you might sleepwalk through life, never confronting the deeper mysteries of being. And so you come full circle. The question, why do I secretly want to suffer, might not have a single, neat answer. It might spring from multiple layers: existential longing, psychological conditioning, spiritual yearning, or even a quiet rebellion against the shallow demands of the modern world. But whatever the reason, the fact remains that suffering is part of your story, and acknowledging your hidden desire for it can be liberating. It breaks the facade that you're merely a victim. It gives you permission to examine your darkness without shame. It might even help you channel that darkness into creative expression, empathy for others, or deep inner transformation. At this point, you might feel a certain heaviness. You've taken a long look at your own relationship with suffering, and it's not easy. There's a tension in realizing that part of you might crave what you're also trying to avoid. But there's also a spark of clarity here, a sense that you're starting to own the full range of your being. This is a turning point. Will you continue to let suffering rule you from the shadows, or will you bring it into the light, examine it, and put it to work for your evolution? The choice is yours, and it's not a choice you make once but again and again, each time you stand at the threshold of a potential storm, because storms will come. You can't stop them. You live in a world of impermanence and fragility. Your relationships, your health, your aspirations, they're all susceptible to change, decay, and loss. You will suffer. That much is certain. But how you experience suffering, how you interpret it, and how you integrate it, that is the question. Will you do it unconsciously, letting it debilitate you or fuel endless cycles of self-inflicted harm? Or will you face it with open eyes, acknowledging that, yes, a part of you might even invite it, because there's something in the storm that you need? Think about it. Don't flinch. Don't run. Hold that question close. What if your suffering holds a key to a dimension of yourself you've never fully explored? What if on the other side of that suffering lies an insight that changes everything? What if the only way to reach that insight is to walk through the flames? These are not comfortable questions, but they might be the most important ones you ever ask. You wonder if, in accepting this idea, you risk becoming obsessed with pain, losing yourself in a cult of suffering. That's a valid fear. Dark obsessions can be seductive, leading you down paths of self-destruction. But obsession isn't the same as integration. To integrate is to remain aware, to maintain balance, to use suffering as a tool rather than an identity. To be obsessed is to lose yourself in the darkness, surrendering your agency. So the practice is one of mindfulness. You recognize the draw of suffering, you see how it can serve your growth, but you also recognize when it stops serving and starts destroying. Jung would say that the integration of the shadow involves moral effort. It's not just an intellectual exercise. You can't simply read about it and be done. You have to wrestle with your demons. You have to face parts of yourself that scare you or fill you with shame. And that wrestling is, in itself, a form of suffering. but it's a suffering that leads to wholeness. And when you face those demons, you might find they aren't as monstrous as you imagined, or you might find they're far darker than you ever dared to believe. Either way, the truth sets you free. You learn that suffering can be a corridor to a more authentic version of yourself. As you stand on this precipice, you might feel conflicting emotions: fear, curiosity, defiance, hope, maybe a touch of exhilaration. You realize that admitting your attraction to suffering isn't a sign of sickness, at least not necessarily. It's an honest admission of a psychic reality, one that might hold crucial lessons. You sense an odd weight lifting off your shoulders as you accept this part of yourself, instead of pretending it doesn't exist. There's a grim sort of relief in admitting that you're more complicated than you thought, that your quest for happiness is tangled up with your dance with pain, and that's okay. You're human. You contain multitudes, light and dark, longing and fear, creation and destruction. This slow-burning realization might even make you laugh wryly. All this time, you tried so hard to avoid suffering, to keep your life neat and tidy, only to find that a piece of you was seeking it out. It's almost comical in a tragic way, but it also illuminates a pathway forward, the path of conscious suffering, the path where you say, I know suffering will come. I know a part of me might even desire it, but I will face it with open eyes. I will learn from it. I will transform it into something that enriches my life and deepens my soul. Imagine the next time you encounter real pain, heartbreak, loss, or failure. You feel the familiar sting, the ache in your chest, the churning in your stomach. But instead of shrinking away or denying it, you welcome it like an old acquaintance. You say, hello again. I've been expecting you. You let yourself feel every nuance of that pain, knowing that inside it lies a seed of wisdom. You ask, what are you here to teach me this time? You let the sorrow speak, and then you listen. Really listen. It might tell you about your hidden fears, your unmet needs, your unexpressed anger, or the illusions you're clinging to. Or it might reveal a longing for deeper meaning, a thirst for experiences that challenge the boundaries of who you think you are. Whatever the lesson, you embrace it. And then, once you've learned what you can, you let the pain pass. You don't try to trap it or idolize it. You move forward changed. In that sense, your hidden desire for suffering can become a willingness to explore the full terrain of your being. It's no longer just a masochistic impulse or a twisted fetish for pain. It's an acceptance that suffering is one gateway to self-knowledge. You walk through that gateway bravely, armed with self-awareness. You don't cling to the suffering, nor do you run from it. You dance with it, and in dancing, you discover new steps, new rhythms. Over time, something shifts in your psyche. You start to see suffering less as a catastrophe and more as an initiation. You become less afraid of life's hardships, less obsessed with the pursuit of superficial happiness. You develop an emotional depth that surprises even you. People might notice a different energy about you, calmer, more grounded, more compassionate. You're no longer rattled by every misfortune. You bear the storms with a quiet resilience, because you know the storm itself can reshape you in ways comfort never can. You aren't addicted to the storm, but you aren't terrified of it either. And that balance might be the closest thing to true freedom. Still, you remain humble. You know suffering can break people. You don't romanticize it as purely ennobling. You've seen individuals swallowed by despair, turned bitter or apathetic by their pain. You understand that suffering can lead to growth, but it can also lead to destruction. And so you remain vigilant. You keep your eyes open, your heart open, ready to make suffering into a teacher rather than a jailer. That's the crux of it. You have to do the work. Suffering won't magically transform you. You transform yourself through suffering if you have the courage and awareness to do so. In that way, you find a curious gratitude for the suffering you once feared. It's not that you celebrate it, but you respect it. You realize it's part of the human condition, part of the psychological tapestry that makes you who you are. Without it, you'd be incomplete. Your greatest insights, your most authentic connections, even your most profound joys might be inextricably linked to the depths you've plumbed. And so you approach life with a new humility, a new willingness to engage with all of it, the bliss and the agony, the triumph and the tragedy. You take a breath, letting this realization settle in. You've walked a long, introspective road. You've confronted truths that might make you uneasy. You've glimpsed the possibility that your longing for suffering could be both destructive and transformative. And you've seen that the power lies in how you approach it. Do you surrender to unconscious self-punishment, or do you embrace a conscious journey of self-discovery? The difference is everything. In the end, you come to understand that you're not doomed to suffer forever, nor are you bound to a shallow pursuit of comfort. You can hold both realities in your hands, the desire for peace and the attraction to suffering. You can let them coexist, informing each other, shaping you into a more complete human being. Perhaps that is your destiny. To be a creature that walks between worlds, light and dark, joy and sorrow, creation and destruction, growing ever deeper with each step. And so, as this reflection draws to a close, you feel something stirring inside you, a quiet resolve. You see that your desire to suffer isn't a sentence to perpetual misery, but a clue to your own complexity, an invitation to wholeness. You'll continue to wrestle with it, no doubt. You'll have moments when you slip back into unconscious patterns, courting pain for the wrong reasons. But maybe now, with these insights fresh in your mind, you can catch yourself sooner. Maybe you can transmute that pain into wisdom, forging a path that honors both your wounds and your capacity for healing. If you take anything away from these words, let it be this: the darkness within you is not your enemy. It's a part of you that carries secrets, insights, and energies you might never discover under constant sunshine. You don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to indulge it blindly either. You can make it conscious, bring it into dialogue with the rest of your being, and let it reveal the truths you've been avoiding. In that process, you might find that you no longer secretly want to suffer. You simply accept suffering as a necessary thread in the tapestry of a rich, fully lived life. And here's the final thought. When the next wave of suffering comes, and it will, remember that part of you that wants this. Not in a twisted sense, but in a deeply human one. A part that knows growth emerges from adversity, that storms bring renewal, that death and rebirth are the cycles of nature, and you're not exempt from that law. In embracing that knowledge, you transcend the role of victim. You become the seeker, the alchemist of your own soul. And maybe that's the only way to truly live, on the edge, neither glorifying pain nor fleeing from it, but welcoming every experience as a stepping stone toward the person you're meant to become. That's how you transform. That's how you make peace with your secret longing for suffering, by allowing it to be a guide, not a prison, by seeing it as a portal to deeper self-awareness, not a chain that drags you down. And so, in the end, your suffering becomes not a curse but a key you can use to unlock realms of understanding that remain hidden to those who never dare confront their own shadows. You hold that key now. The choice to turn it is yours. Let that realization echo in your mind. Let it resonate in your heart, and step forward into the mystery with open eyes. You may find more pain, but you may also find the profound, transformative meaning that only suffering can reveal. And when you emerge, you'll know you have touched the raw edge of existence and survived. You have bled and burned and awakened. And for that, however paradoxical it seems, you might be quietly, powerfully grateful.